Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News with Jeremy Elwood. Jeremy,
Hello.
welcome.
Nice to be back, Pat. Nice to be back.
Yeah, man. I was thinking about this afternoon. Did you do the very first BHN? I think you might have done the very first one.
I think so. Yeah. I think it's certainly very early. I think maybe it was the first though. Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe. I was probably trying to ride your coattails a little bit to see if we could get some more noise about it. That's probably what it was.
Yeah, using me for publicity. That's always a brilliant idea. Well done. Yeah, great.
That's the story of my career, trying to use people.
Pitches you right at the D list. It's great. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Cy. Hello, Simon. That's Simple Simon. Hello, Free Soul. Hello, Politikiwi. Everyone's joining into the chat. Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear from you, actually, Jeremy. You've been away for a couple of months. Well, away, but not on for a couple of months, to see if you noticed the team that's jumping up around us of lovely people who like to participate and hang out. So last night, just to explain to people, I promised that there'd be a conversation. You know what I promised? What I said, every time you promise in broadcasting, it never happens. So Anna got filled up with meetings today, so we didn't get to do a face-to-face with Anna. I promised people last night that there probably would be one today. Dr. Anna Brooks, for people who are joining us who didn't hear last night's conversation. So what we're going to do, and then Anna was going to join us this evening at 10 o'clock to talk about some issues, including, people wanting blood that hasn't been vaccinated or something like that. I don't know. But then Anna's plane got delayed leaving Dunedin. So we're going to talk about that stuff as the last part of the show tonight. And I've sent Anna the link and I've gone, dude, as always with me, Jeremy, you can testify to this. There is no pressure. If you get home, you want a cup of tea and you want to put your feet up, do that. But if you want to jump on for the conversation around COVID and the conversation around vaccinated blood going into babies who need it, you are more than welcome to. So I'm not promising anything, just letting you know that conversation will be happening towards the end of the show. Anna may or may not be with us. Other than that, we're going to have a look at Mr. Luxon today and his 1 year anniversary of being the big boy for the National Party, and also some talk around how ineffective the 3 strikes law was, even though it's something that National promises they're going to bring back. And we're going to have a look at obviously one of the biggest, well, it's not really the biggest news stories in the world, but what happened with Kanye West today. We haven't talked about Kanye at all, Jeremy, during this whole period. And one of the reasons we haven't was I watched a piece on, Trevor Noah does those bits on The Daily Show between the scenes.
Yeah.
He did it between the scenes on Kanye. And he was talking about someone in the middle of a mental health crisis and amplifying that and having empathy for that. And I kind of went, I think there's a lot of fairness to that. But I guess you get to a point where someone keeps putting themselves out there and putting themselves out there and putting themselves out there and putting themselves out there. And you kind of go, well, this is actually kind of news now, so we should probably talk about it.
Yeah, I think that argument maybe held a bit more water 4 years ago. When he first decided to run for president. I think 4 years on, it certainly never diminished the amount of attention he's getting. I mean, I personally don't quite understand why anyone listens to anything Kanye has to say, but people do. Therefore, it's worth discussing.
And I think the themes of what Kanye's talking about at the moment, the disgusting themes, are actually the conversation as opposed to who's saying it. I mean, he's someone with profile who's talking about something, and the something is worth talking about as opposed to the person saying it, even though he is a person of profile. You know what I mean?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
We're going to bring another friend of the show in to join us for this part of the conversation. He's a comedy writer, comedian as well. Dane Giroux joins us. Dane, good evening to you, sir.
How are you doing, everyone? Jeremy?
Yeah. Hey, Dane. Everyone's in there. Look, everyone's going on again. Look, here we go. Hello, Peter. Peter's joining us in. Ro is apologizing because she's late. So there you go. There's no good as well. All right. So, Dane, with absolutely no no rudeness intended. The reason we have you here tonight is because the times we've had you on, one of the things you identify with, especially around like when we talked about hate speech, was how you approach it from a minority, and that minority has been Jewish. So if we're going to talk about Kanye and what Kanye said, I thought it would be appropriate. In fact, I've messaged a rabbi today, a rabbi from Auckland, who might actually join us tomorrow and come on the show tomorrow night to actually talk a bit more in the detail as to what it's all about. But we're going to talk about Kanye. We're going to talk about what happened with Kanye today. And I definitely want everybody's input, but that's why you're here as well, Dane, to actually help us understand that, because there's some things about it that I don't kind of get, and that's mostly because I'm a bit simple. So I want to understand, and I always think if I don't get it, there's probably at least one other person out there that doesn't get something as well. So hopefully for me,
I think a lot of New Zealanders, I mean, we're not New York, there's not like there's so many visible Jews around. I don't think New Zealanders are that educated about Jews and Judaism, to be honest.
Yeah, it's interesting. I always reminded Jason Cook, who's a British comedian who's visited these shores many times. His wife's Jewish, and he has a very funny line, which is he loves New Zealand, but he does have one question, which is, "What did you do with all the Jews?" Because you're right, we don't have a particularly high profile Jewish community. I spent a lot of time in cities like Montreal growing up, and Montreal has a very, very distinct Jewish part of its culture. So it's an interesting point.
Yeah. When I went to New York and saw everyone walking around with kippot and everything, I was like, oh my God, there's so many of us.
Did that feel good? Was there an element of that kind of felt like home? That like this is feeling this, that you related to that, even though you're in a foreign city?
Well, I loved it. It's good to know that there's your people are around you. It's a fantastic feeling.
And just for people's understanding, because last time we talked, you talked about your synagogue. I only know these terms based on watching American comedy mostly, but you are a quote unquote practicing Jew. That's right. How it's referred to, as opposed to a nominal or cultural person.
No, I'm a believer, but I live in a small town, so it's not like I get to synagogue very often. But for the big, we call them a chagim, which are the festivals, the high holy days, Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, and things like that. I'll go down, look, I'm real. Like Wellington would be bad enough. But I'm in the middle too, so I mean, it's slim pickings. Yeah,
I like I said, I'm real. I'm a real one. You can pinch me, feel me. I'm a real one. All right. So listen, if people don't know what we're talking about, I'm sure most people do. Let's actually have a look at what happened with Kanye. So Kanye over the last couple of weeks has gone off the deep end significantly, including going to Mar-a-Lago with a avowed white supremacist and talking to Donald Trump and apparently asking Donald Trump to be his running mate, which would have been, if it could have been a fly on the wall.
Fly on the wall. Would
that not have been the best video piece of video? No, well, we haven't seen it, but having Kanye say to Donald Trump, "Will you be my running mate?" would have been the best thing in the world. And there was a clip on TMZ the other day where Kanye came out sort of with an opportunity to kind of backtrack on some of his anti-Semitic comments, and in doing so made it 10 times worse by talking about all the Jews who are running the entertainment world. We're going to call it you can call it the red wave, you call it the red media or something like that. So he's been talking about at the moment about the media being run by Jewish people. So he then goes on Tim Pool's podcast. Tim Pool runs a pretty big podcast. He's an odd character as Tim Pool because he's an ardent sort of lefty that seems to be one of those guys who is starting to travel over further to the right. And although he claims to be very much left in politics, a lot of his policies he supports and the people he supports are sitting in the right, But whatever, he was on Tim's podcast and Kanye's talking in this way, and he talks about them this and them that, and Tim Pool pushes back a little bit, and he says, I think they're being, I'm going to play it by the way, I think they're being very unfair to you, and Kanye's like, well, who do you mean by them? You can't say it, can you? And Tim's like, well, the corporate media, like the people who write the headlines, have been unfair to you. And that was the only pushback he gives, and it gives a very thin-skinned response. Let's have a look.
They tried to lock me up. That's what, because every time I'm just holding stride, and it's like, I thought I was more Malcolm X, but I find out I'm more MLK because as I'm.
Let me just pause for a second. He's calling himself Martin Luther King. We're going to brush over that a little bit because it's not really what we're talking about tonight. But I just want to reference, he thinks he is not quite so much like Malcolm X anymore, but he's more like Martin Luther King. That's how Kanye kind of where he puts himself at, just just acknowledging that before we get to the conversation we're going to have.
I'm getting hosed down every day by the press, and financially, I'm just standing there. And when I found out that they tried to put me in jail, it was like a dog was biting my arm, and I almost shed a tear, almost, but I still walked.
My apologies about the internet. Not sure.
Stride through it. Yeah,
I think they've been extremely unfair to you. I think.
Who was
all right? I did do this last time.
they though?
I apologize. I'm just going to refresh this and do it again.
To
Go back
lock
to 30
me
seconds.
up, biting my arm, and I almost shed a tear, almost, but I still walked in stride through it.
Yeah. I think they've been extremely unfair to you. I think.
Who was they though? We can't say they is,
corporate
can we?
press. I'm not using the. I don't
So
use
he
the
just
word
said the
as the way I guess you guys use. I'm
It
talking
is
about
them, though, isn't it? I mean, because
No.
because when you think about it, consider it. In 2018,
What do you mean it's not?
What do I mean? Like, okay, so how about you leaving?
And so, even though we can't see it, and I apologize about
Are
the
you for the
footage at the
press?
moment, Kanye just gets up. That's the
He's
pushback.
gone. I'll say it
Tim Pool wouldn't say the
right now.
they he's talking about means Jewish
you,
people. That was enough.
You
to get
guys
Kanye
want
to
to bring that
leave.
stuff up? And then
have
think
the
we're not going to
discussion.
have a
Like,
conversation?
have the discussion.
Like you think Ye's going to come in here?
We're gonna leave it there because it's playing. Oh, sorry about that. I actually checked my internet before we started tonight. And I'm
Mm.
900 meg download. So I don't know why it's buffering like that. I'll have to look at my computer tomorrow. So again, they are trying to lock me up. They are doing this, they're doing that. Kanye is referring to the Jews, quote unquote, the Jews. Tim Pool says the corporate media have been unfair with you. And Kanye storms off because he's like, well, when you say corporate media, you're meaning the Jews. That's the subcontext going on. And he storms out. I'll just throw it to you guys first of all, if you've got any comment on that before we get into the next part of the conversation. Dane, what do you want to say about that, if anything?
Well, my understanding is that it sounds like he's got huge tax issues. So I don't know what that's even got to do with the corporate media or anyone like that. Anyhow, I mean, if he's in the hole for $50 million with the IRS, I mean, no one has to, sick anybody on him. He's in trouble, I mean, I still have to. We talked about the mental health dimension to Kanye.
Mm.
He doesn't have minders. He doesn't have people looking after him. I mean, he's just completely just a free agent wandering around with Nick Fuentes, who's like basically he's a Nazi. This guy,
Holocaust denier as well.
Complete white supremacist, absolute misogynist pig. All of that stuff. You couldn't find a more charming man. So he's wandering around with this guy. He's broken up with his partner and everything. I mean, it's one of the most epic meltdowns that any celebrity's probably ever had publicly ever. I can't think of another one to compare it to. I mean, can you? I mean,
Britney Spears shaving her head, but that was just only impacting her. That wasn't really impacting anyone else.
This is the equivalent, because you think about where he stands in hip hop. I mean, he is a genius in terms of of the music he's been able to create. I was a huge fan. So this is like, to me, this is like Elvis in 1974 or something, or 1969, going this batshit, or Michael Jackson or someone. All of a sudden,
I guess the really intriguing thing, I mean, everything you've just brought up, Dane, is, the tax issues. His divorce was finalized today, or news broke that they signed the papers today, I think. But this has been going on for 4 years, at least. He ran for president, and he was nuts then too. So, yeah, I mean, I'm with you in the chat. I was never a fan, but you would think there'd be somebody in his management or his, record company, or, I'm not quite sure what his setup is, but you'd think somebody would be there just to go, hang on, maybe don't do this on an international platform.
Well, is he just too rich to sort of rein in?
Maybe.
I mean, is
maybe.
that what it comes down to? I mean, he was worth billions of dollars. So
Well,
I guess that
he also thinks that he's Martin Luther King, and he's the greatest musician the world has ever seen. Like he publicly says that. There is a clip from a couple of years ago talking about being the greatest rock and roll star in the world there's ever been on stage. So when you're already now there's some talk in the chat already about bipolarism, etc., etc. I don't know the finalities of that, but let's just talk about ego. When you've got that kind of ego for whatever reason, whether it's mental health or just ego, and you probably You have your own shoe line and your own labels and this, that, and the other thing. Who's telling you what to do? No one.
And also, let's consider, I mean, we do live in a world where incredibly rich, batshit crazy people are idolized. I mean, he's not alone. You know, Trump himself, Elon Musk, all of, you know, the Kardashians, he's just divorced out of that family. But, you know, we do kind of idolize. There's a certain segment of society that holds these people up as renegades and truth seekers, which in a way makes, to bring it back to what he was actually saying, makes that even more dangerous, because, you know, if people are seeing him as this eccentric genius, but he's falling back on the old trope of, I mean, the easiest trope in the book, you have money problems, oh, it's the Jews' fault. You know, it's the easiest cliche in the book. But there'll be a certain number of people listening to it going, oh, well, he's the only one who's saying it out loud. He's telling the truth.
Yeah, I may have even said last time, I can't remember, because this happened about a month ago. He's been on the slide for at least a month, hasn't he? But I was looking at a lot of Facebook threads from hip hop, you know, pages, Facebook pages, and things like that, and I did find there was definitely, you know, people in the black community, clearly in the black community over there, who were like, you know, yeah, they're trying to put us down. You know, he's speaking truth. But a lot of people on those threads were pushing back and saying, no, this guy's sick. You know, so, I mean, a lot of people in the black community and I mean, a lot of people know what's going on and how demented this is. I mean, I was heartened to see the amount of pushback on these pages. Yeah.
Here's something I'd like to try and understand, and I'm not suggesting I'm going to understand this, and I'm not suggesting that you are going to be able to explain this to me, Dane. Maybe speaking with a rabbi tomorrow, if that does come off, I can learn some more. It seems to me, and anyone in the chat, and there are people already correcting me, can correct me if this is wrong from their perception, but it feels to me, maybe it's because I ingest a whole bunch of American media, maybe that's the difference, is that anti-Semitism is the mortal sin. More so than racism, more so than sexism, more so than any other discrimination, that anti-Semitism is up the top as being the worst of the worst. First of all, I'd be interested to know from either of you guys, is that perception just me, or do you feel that as well? And secondly, if it is, I wonder why. And let me be very clear. I'm not saying if it is, it shouldn't be. I'm saying if it is, why? Like, let me just preface it by saying, if Kanye had pulled his phone out and gone, look at all these Catholics running the media, you know, I'm going to call it the purple media, or look at all these people of Asian ancestry running the media. It doesn't feel like it would have the same than, you know, all the Jews. So it feels different, and I'm wondering why.
Look, I don't think it's. I mean, I don't think it's like the top of the worst. I don't think. I mean, I would never describe any form of racism like that. I think that, you know, bigotry is bigotry, really, and none stand again on top of another. But I think I know where you're coming from. The sense you've got, to me, it's the oldest. You know, that's, you know, so it's almost like it's prehistoric. You know, this stuff is ancient stuff. I mean, this stuff goes back 2,000 years, at least. I mean, I've got my own theories on it, but they're only going to be theories, you know. And you know, some people share the theories that I have, but I think when you look at Christianity, for instance, Christians, Muslims, don't be offended. This is just me talking. But, you know, Christianity had its own sort of form of utopianism to share with the world, right?
Yeah.
And the Jews said, no, thank you. And you know, they sort of needed us to make it legitimate. I mean, there is that sense that without the Jews being on board and actually buying into this Jewish Messiah, you know what I mean? They're sort of on shaky ground, even to this day. I mean, I think there is a vulnerability in Christianity in a self-consciousness because of that, because they know that we rejected that Messiah. We rejected that utopianism. But a very similar thing.
I wonder if you're also saying, on some level, especially when you look at like the worst of the worst, like the white supremacists, KKK, that kind of stuff, who then claim to be Christians, it's you killed our boy. There's that element as well, which is not only did the Jews reject this message, then they actually killed the person who was bringing it as well. Could that be a part of the underlying 2,000 years of why that feels that way?
Well, that's right. There could have been this amazing golden time. There could have been this amazing reign on earth, and you can think of it. You can think of it as quite metaphorically as well, what that reign on earth would have meant. But, utopia was so close and you rejected it for us,
Right.
And Islam is a very similar story. It's like, Muhammad, where he was preaching originally, they were around, Saudi and the desert and that, they were all Jewish cities back then, really. I mean, those whole, once the Jews had come out of the Levant and everything, they settled around a lot of those areas. And again, it was like, look, I've got a super religion to offer you. It's going to incorporate your religion. It's going to have elements of Christianity, and I'm here to wrap it in a bow. And again, we said no, thank you. And then when you look at communism, it's a Jewish plot, to undermine capitalism, and capitalism is a Jewish plot to undermine socialism. So it's like we're there to make sure utopia never happens. The world would be fantastic if it wasn't for you meddling Jews. It really is that.
I agree. I agree with all of that, Dane. I think the interesting thing in contemporary society, and by contemporary I really mean the last 70 odd years, is the fact that all of that history, the thing that makes anti-Semitism to me still such a strong emotive, again, I'm not going to try and rank people's isms at any point, but the thing is that the Holocaust happened. And it is such a clear and obvious sign of where the end point for these hatreds can be. And it's interesting, like you brought up Nick Fuentes. It's fascinating to me that the reason he's such an offensive person to many people is the fact that he's a Nazi takes him to one level. The fact that he's a Holocaust denier is like the next step. That's like the ultimate step for white supremacy.
He mocks it. He mocks the whole
exactly. Yeah, but that's the thing
like
is
David
that,
Irving, who's trying to make a case and having a veneer of sort of academia or something. He's openly mocking.
But I think that's the thing is that it is so clear to the vast majority of people that happened, and it happened because of anti-Semitism. So there is a real endpoint. It's one of the reasons I would argue that racism, it's this ridiculous kind of ranking system that we have of people's xenophobias or hatreds. Racism is climbing up the more people learn about the history. But for the last 70 years, a lot of that history has not been as widely known. Whereas the 1940s, the Holocaust, people know about it. It's in popular culture, and now you can argue it's because a lot of those movies are made by people of Jewish descent. But it's impossible to ignore. It's impossible to brush it off as something that happened, even though it was 70 years ago. It still feels very, very contemporary. And so I think, going back to your question, Pat, I think that's why it's still, particularly in American society, particularly in the US, where Jewish culture is everywhere. It's so ingrained. It is, I mean, there is, conspiracy theories aside, the evidence of Jewish involvement in the media, the film, the music industries is so huge. I mean, some of the absolute pioneers in these businesses have been Jewish. So to try and justify that in the face of what happened 70 odd years ago is seen as so out there, that it's such a clear hatred. There just is that for most people, there is no moral justification for it. You can't try and justify away those events that happened.
Let me just jump in for a sec, because I'm the one learning here, right? This is my question. Because like I was thinking about examples today, and possibly people will criticize me for saying this. It's not racist to say there are a lot of Asian accountants. It's not racist to say there are a lot of African American basketball players, but to say there are a lot of Jews running the media seems to be so. And not racist, but anti-Semitic. And what I actually heard from you, Dane, let me repeat this back to you how I heard it, and tell me if I've sort of got something here. Not like, yay, I'm right, but as in I've learned something. It's not that the Jews get blamed for, whatever, Jesus dying or the global financial crisis, is that there's always a reason to blame the Jews for everything. Like, no matter what goes wrong in someone's life or in society, someone will always blame the Jews. Whereas someone's not always going to blame the Catholics or blame the Cambodians or blame, but there's always a link somewhere by some group holding the Jews responsible for that. And because it's always their quote unquote fault, that's perhaps one of the reasons that some people see it as more prevalent, more heightened, whatever the correct word is. Is there anything about what I've just said that resonates back from what you've been saying?
Yeah. I mean, I think everything I was talking about leads us to the point of, therefore, we should never let them get into any position of power. I think that's why it's an issue when Jews are in power. I mean, there might be a lot of Asian accountants, and people might say that, and it might not be taken as racist, but no one is saying, and we don't want Asian accountants.
Gotcha. Yeah.
They're not saying it because we can't trust them, so we should get them out of there. What we know from history is that these people should not have power.
Yeah,
like that's what the subtext to it all is. It's like the idea of a Jew being in power is the issue. Like Jews should be, controlled. They should be in a ghetto, locked up at night. You know what I mean? So they don't get out, like we were in Europe right way back. Put a lock on the gate at the end of the night. That's all good. That's what I think it is. It's like, it's not, I've identified all these Jews are in power, and I don't think they should be in power. I think that's what it's really.
And there's also an equal and opposite as well, because like this is, I'm my tongue is in my cheek here. But not only do people not say there's so many Asian accountants, we don't want there to be. Often, I mean, I've heard maybe tongue in cheek, but there's always some truth in jest. People saying, if you want a good accountant, you should get an Asian accountant. Like, it's actually something that people say this is a good thing. It's not even that they say there shouldn't be. They say this is good because there is a predisposed. This community is predisposed to be very good in this skill set. So that's a great thing. So it's actually literally the opposite of saying, the Jews shouldn't have things. It's saying this other people group should be in this area.
At a certain level. I mean, obviously, in my business, the idea of, if you want a good joke writer, find yourself a funny Jew. Absolutely. That's what you want.
I heard Jon Stewart say the other night, I think he was on Colbert, he said something about if you've really got a problem with a Jew, that's fine. Just find someone else to go write all your Broadway shows. Yeah. So that was his sideways joke.
Well, this has been. There was a rabbi who I follow online, an American guy, and he made a good point. He said, "Look, if we do control the entertainment industry, we got nothing to apologize for. We've brought joy and laughter and everything into people's lives for 100 years now through Hollywood. So many people have been made superstars. So many fantastic films and creations have been put out there. It's like,
just in case it wasn't clear, that's exactly the point I was trying to make earlier. Absolutely, I mean, I think saying there's a lot of Jews in the media is just a fact, and I was going to say thank God for it, but irony, I'm going to leave religion out of it.
Well, look, there's a lot of black people who box in the States, and there's a lot of Polynesian rugby league and rugby players, and great.
People have skill sets.
Yeah,
people can be predisposed for skill sets, and apparently show tunes is one of those predispositions for the Jewish community.
Well, you won't get
Dane, Dane, it's been great to have you here tonight. I really appreciate it. And if no one else got anything out of it, I'm learning, and that's always a good thing.
Well, can I leave you with this? It's a conspiracy theory.
Okay.
That's where it's a little different from other forms of racism too. And even, some of the Nazis now, when they talk about Muslims, they have a conspiratorial edge to them because, and how do they justify that? Oh, well, the Jews are bringing the Muslims over.
They still find a way to slide that in there. Like I said, it's always your fault. It's always the Jewish people's fault. Hey, Dane, thanks for joining us tonight, mate. That's been amazing.
Worries. See you,
Jeremy. Appreciate it.
See you.
Some messages that have been coming in. Look, the messages have gone bananas. I'm not going to get a chance to get to all of them. Let's just mention a couple of them. Simon says, interesting fact that New Zealand has had 3 prime ministers of Jewish descent. Sai says, Ye is definitely showing his signs of being bipolar. He needs treatment, but he won't get it as he sees the symptoms as signs he is right. and others are after him or out to get him. Kim says Tim Pool has made a big following and insane amount of money claiming to be a lefty. Well, yeah, I guess when I said he used to be on the left, that's what I'm saying, claiming to be on the left, and now he's certainly moving to the right. I mean, there's a few people in the chat telling me he's not left. I'm not saying that. I'm saying he was positioning himself on the left, and he's slowly moving to the right, like many have done, because there's more money to be made on the right in America, at least, Jeremy. Tim Pool also referred to the black vote as if all black people vote the same. Free Soul says World War II still echoes in people's memories lest we forget. So that's to do with, you know, why is it so bad? It's a strange way to say it, but you know what I mean. Mike says, as usual, this is good listening. Thanks. Thank you, Mike. And Stephen says, Yom Tovil, really appreciate the discussion on bigotry tonight. Bigotry is bigotry, 100%. Anything else you want to say to that, Jeremy, before we kind of crack on?
No, let's crack on.
Let's crack on. Now, I apologize about whatever happened with the video there. I'm going to clean my computer out tomorrow. I don't know why it's playing up on me a little bit, because I'm having 900 plus meg download speed at the moment. I checked it before I came on, so not entirely sure what's going on. I apologize if this does it again, but let's have a look at AM show this morning with Christopher Luxon talking to our friend Ryan Bridge about his last 12 months. This is the 12-month anniversary of Christopher Luxon being the leader of the National Party, and he had a bit of a chat with Ryan Bridge about that.
I feel great. I mean, it's been quite a year. We've made, I think, tremendous progress in that time. There's always more to do, and I'm always constructively dissatisfied. So there's it's going to be quite a fun year ahead.
What would you give yourself a rating out of 10 for your first year?
Oh, there's always things I could do better. I think probably the low point of the year was my 4-day holiday to Te Puke, really.
I don't think anyone's going to argue with that.
Yeah.
But seriously, you're into targets.
Or declaring to you that I like country music was probably another low point.
Yeah,
you know,
but you like targets, don't you? And you like things. So what would you score yourself if you had to give a score out of 10?
Look, I mean, I always I probably give myself a 7. You know?
All right, there we go. Room for improvement.
Yeah.
So there you go, Jeremy. 7 out of 10. I think still, once again, Mr. Luxon, with respect to him, is not getting good advice on how to sell these ideas, because making a joke about my 4-day holiday in Te Puke when he was in Hawaii with his family, it just kind of reeks of, to me at least, of like you still don't get it. You still don't quite get that you're making light of that moment where it was bad optics, which we talked about yesterday with Mr. Luxon, him talking about optics. But what are your thoughts, Jeremy?
Well, that's his whole shtick, isn't it? He is I'm not just your boss, I'm your mate. He's that guy. You know, he's the fun boss who's wacky at parties and then fires you the next day. Yeah. And you know, to be fair, I mean, he's been built up very much as the sort of natural successor to John Key, and John Key had that as well. That was his thing. I mean, I don't think you can argue with the fact that when he says they've made a lot of progress in the 1 year, I mean, well, sure they have, because in the 2 years before that, they had 4 different leaders and they made no progress at all because of all the infighting in the National Party.
Melvin's brought that up. It's the 1 year milestone of National not changing its leadership. So,
absolutely.
Celebration.
Yeah.
And
but
also,
again,
you can't argue that progress, because even the poll numbers will say they've obviously made progress. Now, whether that progress turns into tangible, positive change for the country or not, I don't know. But certainly, if you look at how they're being, I mean, whether they've made progress or whether Labour's, burning bridges, but whatever it means, it still means that they are further down the track than they were.
But the other thing is, the reason he can laugh off his low point being his holiday in Te Puke, I'd be interested. Like, I don't think he got asked what the high point of his last year is, because the interesting thing is that neither of these highs or his lows are anything particularly spectacular. Like you say, if the absolute low point of his last year is bad optics, then okay, that's fine. But what was his high point? I mean, what have they actually? They've made progress in the polls, but what have they actually done? What have they announced? What have they what solutions have they come up with? I mean, at the moment, they're running a very standard election year campaign, or pre-election year campaign, where it's Labour's election to lose, and history tells us that they probably will, just because they've been around for so long. They've been through a huge moment in New Zealand history with COVID, plus everything before that. History tells us that the cycle means we roll over, we move to another party. So they haven't really had to do anything, and they've not done anything reasonably well.
Yeah, and they've sat in the they've sat in the wings as an oppositional party would do, not saying we're the best. They've sat in the wings saying they're the worst.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's all. That's all an oppositional party can do at this stage. To the point that Christopher Luxon makes jokes about Labor being obsessed with him and always wanted to talk about him. And I keep saying, can you find a press conference in the last 12 months where he hasn't mentioned either Labor or the Prime Minister or Grant Robertson? So the obsession thing might be the wrong way around. But that was in a narrative that the media ran with. Is Labor obsessed with Chris Luxon?
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, all of the criticisms or concerns, even that even national voters had when Chris Luxon came in, were what do people know about him? How personable is he? How charismatic is he? I mean, those were the main things. And he's obviously that's going back to this thing of I'm going to have a laugh about myself on TV. That's trying to build that. I don't know how successful that is. I mean, I still don't know how do people really feel about him. He hasn't really broken through, whether you like John Key or not. He did have a charisma. He did have a strike through on media. He grabbed something. As far as I'm concerned, I mean, I still think Luxon is just yet another middle-aged, middle-class white guy. And, if you put him on an international stage, he would just sort of vanish. But he doesn't, at the moment, he doesn't need to be much more than that because, like you say, Labor are having problems. Either some of them are of their own creation and some of them are just problems of timing.
I remember speaking to a very well-informed lady. You may know her. In fact, you may have shared a wedding chapel with her in Las Vegas once upon a time, who said to me before the last election in one of the podcasts, why would you replace an exceptional woman with a mediocre man? And I don't even remember which politician it was at that stage for the National Party. And I just wonder what Michelle would say today or others, because she was referring to Jacinda Ardern as an exceptional woman and whatever iteration of the white middle-class male was the leader at that time as a mediocre man. I wonder what the public now think about that. I wonder if some of the gloss has come off. I wonder if the people still think that Jacinda is exceptional, but it's time for a change. I wonder how that story would go today.
Yeah, and actually the fact is, even when Michelle said that at that time, there's a certain chunk of the population that will always want to replace an exceptional woman with a mediocre man because they find it less threatening.
Yeah. Also, David's come up with a couple of good things. Talk about lows. He's brought up Sam Uffindale. That's actually interesting that low didn't come up. And he also has brought up his support for Liz Truss. Yeah. So if he pulls up, maybe he's avoided some of the actual lows to make a bit of light about not being so smart with social media.
Yeah, let's be honest. I mean, it's a friendly fire interview. It's Ryan Bridge on that show. He wasn't going to get hauled over the coals, whatever he answered on that. And there's no way they're actually going to bring up the actual lows. I mean, no politician will do that. What's your actual low? Oh, having an affair. No, they're never going to bring that up. They'll come up with a sort of jokey answer.
Speaking of the friendly fire, I'm going to pay a bit more of this conversation now because it does go into an interesting potential policy conversation around the retirement age going up. So let's have a listen to what they had to say about that. But I wrote on my notes here, Bridges helps Luxon, because there's a part of this conversation where Chris Luxon doesn't seem to really have the answer, and then Ryan Bridge gives it to him. You'll see the point. If you don't see the point, I'll go like this when it happens. And it's Ryan Bridge, the interviewer, explains to Christopher Luxon what Christopher Luxon is going to do. But still, this conversation around the retirement age is an interesting one.
Well, look, we've got to face facts, which is we've got an aging population. Every decade, we live another 1.3 years in terms of life expectancy, and we've also got a rising level of cost as a consequence. And all we're saying is, look, let's do this in a really slow, gradual way. Give people 15 to 20 years notice that it's coming, and then even then, let's stage it out so that 2 years is.
Yeah, but your body can only work manual labour for so long. Well, so then, what do you say to your builders this morning?
Well, then let's look at some other things if that's necessary in terms of supports that we might need to have for people.
Like what?
But what I'd say to you is, I worked in organisations where I had workers that had been with the company, say, for 50 years, 40 years.
So still not really an answer, but Ryan will help him shortly.
That I talk to, frankly, when they're in their 30s, their bodies are going through some pretty tough times, and they often then change the type of role they do. They might be less on the tools and more into the project management side of things or other things as well. So I get it. It's really tough in the sense of, but you have to rule a line somewhere. But many other countries are already at 67.
But you would look at some sort of support for people. If they were in a manual job and they had no other options available to them, they hadn't upskilled to be able to do something else, you're saying there might be support.
Well, where we've got...
Notice that Christopher Luxon didn't say any of that.
No,
he didn't word it like that
not,
at all.
no.
None of that. But Ryan Bridge was like, so this is what you will do. He gave him the policy
expected
idea.
to see Nicola Willis's hand come out from the side of the screen there, just with the notes, with the talking notes, going, do this, do this. Yeah.
I'll play you a bit more of this because they do go into the conversation around retirement age and Māori and retirement age as well.
Whether it's disability payments or those sorts of things. But what I'm saying is, on the superannuation thing, you have to draw a line somewhere. The pragmatic, practical thing is to give people plenty of time to adjust.
What about Māori? So if you're a Māori male, 73 is your life expectancy, and Asian male, 85.
Yeah.
How's that fair?
So Māori, live 7 years shorter than the rest of the population. That's a major challenge for New Zealand. What we really have to then work on is Māori health outcomes and make sure that we can make great progress on that.
It would be good, if there was some kind of initiative for Māori health that a government could start to get behind to help in that area, and make like a wraparound service that could start to address some of those things. And Christopher Luxon's really worried about it. Oh, just as a side note as well, it's got nothing to do with what we're talking about, Jeremy, but there's something about getting rid of the Māori Health Authority that National Act want to do. They just popped into the back of my head. It's not part of this conversation, obviously, but if there was some way that the government could initiate, plans and put things in place to help Māori with those outcomes, that would be an idea, I guess, wouldn't it? I guess that's what Christopher Luxon's saying.
It's just not as clear a soundbite as we're going to raise the retirement age. It's a foggy election promise, Pat. What are you talking about? Well, we're going to try to improve the health outcomes for people who need improved health outcomes. Yeah, no.
Look, I think that this is. To be honest with you, just being blunt, I think retirement age, I'm going to say, obviously does need to go up. When it was 60, we were living an average age of whatever it was, 70. Now it's 65 and we're living an average age of 80, and if it was to go up in 15 years from now to 67, the average life expectancy will be 85. So I think when it comes to an aging population, it makes sense to me that it could go up. I don't have a huge problem, but it seems to be one of those poison chalice. I remember Winston Peters as the master of this, our mate, Winston Peters, Jeremy. He was talking, and he talks to all these Blue Rinse Brigade, and he talks to them all about, there's an attack on you guys. And I remember saying, there's not a fucking attack on them. They're already retired. It's an attack on me. I'm the one that would have to. So why? But he sold it beautifully, and he got them believing that it was an attack on them because they were talking about increasing the age of retirement. But I kind of think it's going to happen. But who's going to introduce it, and whoever does is being handed that poison chalice.
Yeah, absolutely, and but it is also it's a poison chalice, and for both sides, because as soon as you start making the debate, you're absolutely right. He said in that interview, we're talking about something 15, 20 years down the track. Well, 20 years down the track is when I hit retirement age.
Yeah,
slightly less than 20 actually, but but that's not what I want to be talking about for the next 20 years. It's not even what I want to be talking about for the next year. I want to be talking about, like you just said, well, what happens between now and then? For a lot of people, currently, the idea of retiring it's not a thing people look forward to, is hitting retirement age, because a lot of people are struggling to put any money aside for it. People aren't hitting retirement age and going, right, that's it, I'm kicking back, I'm going to my beach house, I'm going fishing. Well, Christopher Luxon probably is, but 20 years to retirement. Also in my field, it's not like, I have a particularly strong pension plan. But yeah, for a lot of people, there's a lot of issues that are going to happen in the next 15, 20 years that are far more important than whether or not they're going to get their superannuation 1 year or 2 years later.
Yeah, and one other thing, it's not part of that story, but I wanted to touch on it because it came out today to do with National Party. It's not policy, but it's something they're talking about, the 3 strikes law. Story out today, reinstating 3 strikes law won't curb offending, says a law expert. Now, I think we know this without talking about it, but I wanted to kind of angle it 2 ways here. National introduced the law while they were in government in 2010. It means after 3 offences, an offender had to be given the harshest penalty. That's why they called it 3 strikes and the max, not 3 strikes and you're out, like in America. They called it 3 strikes and the max. However, Labor repealed the law earlier this year, and AUT Law Dean Kylie Quince, we'll go with, says its reintroduction won't work. There's no evidence that it has an impact on the number or nature of offences that people commit. Quince told Breakfast, she said that during the 11 years that New Zealand had the policy, there was no change in crime rates across the country. A couple of things around this. I think we kind of know that. It's a talking point. It's almost like a right-wing trope to jar up the base for being tough on crime. But yesterday we talked about, and I am concerned about the idea of Labor entrenching laws in place that aren't constitutional, but National used an expert, a constitutional expert, as the cornerstone of their argument as to why Labor shouldn't do that. Well, here's another expert, a singular expert, saying that 3 strikes won't work. I wonder if National will give this singular expert the same weight as they gave the singular expert yesterday about entrenchment, because that's what it is. It's a singular expert saying no to this.
Well, no, of course they won't, because it's not their expert. You know, but it's interesting. 3 strikes is weirdly enough, I've you know, gotten to know over the years quite a number of judges. It's a various long stories, but it's and from all sides of the political spectrum. But one of the few things that all of them, in my experience, agree on is that 3 strikes didn't work. That it was a terrible idea, you know, right from its inception. And that article goes on to explain that one of the reasons, you know, if you look at the statistics, there were a diminishing number of first people, you know, the number of charges at first strike level, number of charges at second, number of third, diminished rapidly. But a big part of that reason was that police and judiciary would go out of their way to try and adjust the charges slightly so that they didn't qualify for the 3 strikes, because they knew it was an inherently unfair and biased system. And yeah, so bringing it back in is, I mean, you want to talk about a poison chalice again. 3 strikes, catchy name, looks great in a soundbite. Tough on law and order. It's another, you know, absolute. We're pulling out all the greatest hits in this election. You know, tough on crime, all of this stuff. 3 strikes, really catchy. It doesn't work.
Yeah, and I think the research for that worldwide says the same thing.
Absolutely.
I mean, it doesn't work in America. It hasn't worked in America. In fact, there's plenty of research that says it can do more harm than good, because in America, when it's 3 strikes and you're out, that means that the person will do anything they need to do to get away on that 3rd strike.
Yep.
I mean, if it's a minor crime, right, but it could end up putting you in prison for the rest of the time, why would you care about not, you know, running down that person or getting through, you know, and becoming more violent to get away? Because no matter what you do, you're out. Whether it's a pickpocket or whether it's shooting someone in the head. So you might as well do everything you can to get away.
No, I agree. I mean, in some ways, that's one of my arguments against the death penalty. It's the same thing. Is, you know, when you know you're facing something that is the rest of your life, then yeah, absolutely. You know, why stop at one murder? Yeah.
Hey, let's go on to the last topic of the night, which is well, let's just play it first of all. I'm sure people have heard this around places today. Protesters gather outside Auckland High Court as Health New Zealand faces off with parents of a sick baby over vaccinated blood donors. If you don't know the story, put your I'm ready to be shocked hat on.
Well, a 4-month-old baby is caught in the middle of a row between his parents and Health New Zealand. He needs life-saving surgery, but his parents don't want him to receive blood from those who have been vaccinated. And now Health New Zealand wants guardianship. Dozens of the parent supporters turned up at court, and Alice Wilkins was also there.
At the centre of all of this,
it's a freedom to choose,
is one tiny person, a 4-month-old baby.
He's stable at the moment. He's doing well. He needs an urgent operation.
Except progress to get that operation has come to a standstill as his parents engage in a standoff with Te Whatu Ora Health New Zealand in court.
The baby concerned, obviously, is really
pretty much in uncharted territory at this stage.
The 4-month-old has the heart condition pulmonary valve stenosis. His case is severe and needs a procedure to allow blood to flow properly around his body. But his parents don't want the blood of those who've received a COVID vaccine to be used in his surgery. And while both vaccinated and unvaccinated people can donate to our blood bank, that blood isn't held separately.
And neither fucking should it be. Can you imagine a system where we're going to play into these hands of these conspiracy theories, tin hat wearing lunatics and start separating blood, let alone from the fact that everyone's worried about your health privacy? Do you think that legally you're going to be allowed to ask someone? This is a side point. Have you been vaccinated before you give blood? Do you honestly think that that's a legal question you're supposed to be asked, allowed to be asked? It's ludicrous.
Well, I mean, just on that question, I mean, we do ask people questions such as, I'm not allowed to donate blood because I lived in the UK during a certain time in the 90s, and because when mad cow disease was around, Jacob Creutzfeldt, and I do have to answer that question, and if I answer yes, the answer is no. But more importantly, the fact is, whether you've been vaccinated or not makes no difference when you're donating blood. You know, it doesn't make any difference.
No.
You know, someone pointed out, some medical expert, and absolutely right, which is basically all blood donated in New Zealand will have COVID elements in it, you know, COVID antibodies, because so many of people have had the virus. Yeah.
And this is coming out later this evening.
Yeah.
No medical risk for children receiving vaccinated blood.
No, of course not.
Says the people who are in the know of this. Let's just play the end of the story. Then I want to go on to one other part about this.
By this stage, several weeks ago, a child with this condition would have been treated.
We need to have safe blood. That is our right as a mother and as my voice for my baby.
Now, Te Whatu Ora has made an application to put the baby's guardianship into the court so surgery can go ahead, saying today in a statement, "We know that it can be worrying when parents have a child who is unwell and are making decisions about their care. The decision to make an application is always made with the best interests of the child in mind and following extensive conversations with whānau." But the baby's parents and their lawyer, known anti-mandate campaigner Sue Gray, say they have around 30 unvaccinated donors ready to provide blood for his surgery.
Where there's a solution, it would be really a shame that that solution be missed. The ideal outcome would be that the blood bank would agree to collect blood from these donors and put it aside ready for this baby to have the operation that he needs.
A crowd of the family's supporters gathered outside the High Court. The medical fate of their baby put on pause until the matter is heard in court next week.
Can you imagine, Jeremy, if we were allowed to dictate whose people's blood we were allowed to receive, what attributes the people giving us blood were allowed to have? We've just been talking about white supremacists. Could you imagine someone going, none of that Maori blood in me, none of that Maori, and I've got the right?
First thing that popped into my head was, this is bloodborne eugenics, you know? And so putting aside, let's put aside science, logic, and reason here for a second, Pat.
Okay.
Let's put aside the scientific fact that the blood that you put into yourself is not going to, you know, if it's vaccinated or unvaccinated. Yeah, absolutely right. If we're going to set up the society where, you know, you have a list of criteria you can tick off before you receive blood from somebody, I mean, it's insane. I'm trying to put together a reasoned argument here, but I can't even play devil's advocate on this one. It's, you know, there is a precedent for this. You know, we've seen it. This is cases like this have come up in the past with members of certain religious groups, usually very fringe elements of certain religious groups, who refuse medical treatment. And, you know, there has been a legal precedent where a court has, by the way, just to be clear, they're not saying they want to take the baby away from this family. They're not saying that at all. They're saying that its medical guardianship is handed over to the court, which means the court it's like giving somebody the power of attorney.
Yeah.
You know, they're not saying the child can no longer live with you. We're not removing the child from their care. They're saying somebody more reasoned will get to tick that box that agrees to a surgery. So, yeah, that's where it's at.
There's another important part of this if we're going to play the game of let's just throw logic and reason out the window.
Sorry I suggested that, but yeah. Because neither you and I are really built for that.
If we've got two options, yeah. Option A would seem to be don't give your child a blood transfusion and looks like they're going to die, right? Because the condition they've got doesn't enable the blood to circulate properly. So don't give your children a blood transfusion. Child dies. Do give your child a blood transfusion, even if they were right that it comes with more risks. Child lives and goes on to be able to potentially fight the evil vaccine that's in the blood. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, I know what the response is going to be. Well, they should give them the unvaccinated blood. But then, like I said, so what happens when the white supremacist says, I don't want brown blood in me? Or, you know, whatever it is. Or the Maori says, I don't want, you know, Caucasian blood in me. Or the Cantabrian says, I don't want fucking Auckland blood in me. Or whatever it is. You know, then what? Because if this precedent was set, then what?
Yeah, and then, but then what happens if, you know, the next family that decide this, they see this case and they go, well, I don't want I don't want vaccinated blood in me the next time I have an operation, but they don't have these 30 friends that Sue Gray has managed to invent out of somewhere who are willing to donate 30 unvaccinated people. So what do? They just don't get a blood transfusion? Exactly. Yeah.
I also think Sue Gray, the lawyer, said, and I wrote it down here, she said when she was speaking to camera, we're looking for the ideal outcome. So the ideal outcome is to use the advice at hand by the medical fraternity that says there's no risk. The child should have had an operation several weeks ago, as the lawyer was saying, and get the child fixed up. That's the ideal outcome. The people who are not allowing the ideal outcome are primarily the parents, but this is the part that I get a little bit angry with, Jeremy. And I'll tell you why. Okay. It's because I've said this many times before. The people who have these beliefs about vaccines and masks and all these sorts of things have been told these beliefs by people at the top. Paula Penfold's documentary, which was called Fire and Fury, when she came on the show and talks to us, she said they were going to call it the instigators. And the reason she was going to call it the instigators was she didn't really want to make it about the people at the event. She wanted to make it about the people telling the people about the event. The instigators that actually gave out all the mis and disinformation. I'm being generous by saying misinformation because, as we know, means the information is wrong, but you don't realize it's wrong. Whereas disinformation is you know it's wrong and you spread it anyway. So those were the people spreading the mis and disinformation to bring those people along. You may or may not have seen it that press conference was Liz Gunn. I thank the good Lord, the good Jewish Lord, that she got no airtime today because she is one of the instigators. And let me just play you something from a conversation that she had talking about this couple and this family. Now, this might get us kicked off YouTube because I think she's kicked off YouTube, but I want to play this for you and then I will respond to it.
Very quick, it shocked me. They had a toddler in the tiniest of rooms. They had twins, 2 babies. The mother is sleeping in there. Cole, the father, is coming in and out. The stress on that family of that alone, if they had all the support and love in that hospital in the world, it would still be a very stressful environment. You can feel it's quite claustrophobic. And then on top of that, they've got these psychological games being played by doctors, as you said, Calvin, trying to win, trying to feed their hubris, trying to say we're more important, we know, and you humans, you Kiwis know nothing. The stress on them is extraordinary, and look how calmly the mum copes with little Jack, the toddler, melting down a number of times.
Now, the reason I'm furious about this on some level, right? I started watching the movie. It's on Netflix. It's a German remake of All Quiet on the Western Front. It's really interesting watching it from a German perspective, actually making the movie of a book written by a German, not watching the Americanized version of it. And at the start of it, there's this scene where all these 17-year-olds, like we've heard stories before because they've been reading the comic books about war and it's being glorified. And they're like, oh, this is so exciting. We're going to the front. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. It's amazing. They've been fed all this bullshit by the I guess by the generals or by society that this war is a glorious thing and it's a fantastic thing and you should get involved. And of course, then they go to war and they realize what an absolute nightmare it is. These 17-year-olds have been fed a lie by the army, by the generals, by their government about what this war is. And then they go to it and they see how wrong they were. I feel like people like these parents have been fed a lie by these instigators, of which fucking Liz Gunn is one of them. And now they're in a position where they're in the trenches, if you will, with a child who may die based on all this bullshit information they've been given by people like Liz Gunn, who are now grifting off this, who are now getting profiled of this. I jotted down a few things she said. She says about the stress they were under. She said about the psychological games that the doctors were playing. Now, the reason that they're under stress and the reason they have a perception of psychological games is because of people like Liz fucking Gunn spreading the bullshit.
There's something a little ripe about saying that when they were in their hospital room, the amount of stress and psychological games that they were having to put up with, when your next job is to trot them out in front of a television camera with a massive counterspin sign hanging behind their heads. If you didn't see that, it was, front and center. What kind of psychological game are you playing? What kind of stress are you adding there?
But that's the thing. And I think that so many of these people, and I know if these people see this, like the people who are at the protest or the people who believe what Liz Gunn says, they'll be like, oh, shell, oh, part of the, oh, who's paying you? But I mean, the reality is, whether you believe it or not, you are either purposefully or inadvertently being duped by people giving out bad information. Remember, we've done these bits before. Conspiracy theorists are wrong always, ... mostly. It's very easy to do the research. It's very easy to figure it out. And Liz Gunn, basically, it's the cyclical thing where she is sowing these seeds of confusion and sowing these seeds of stress and then going, can you see how stressed these people are? Can you see how confused they are? Yeah. Because you've been putting it out there. It's like what's happening in America at the moment with all these people not believing the election results, and then all the right-wing media and the right-wing politicians saying people don't believe the election results. And that's because they've spent the last 2 years, the same right-wing media and right-wing politicians, telling them that there's something wrong with the election results.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So it's very
it is a vicious cycle, and these people, regardless of their own personal take on, regardless of how they feel with, like you say, the disinformation that they've fed. I do feel for this family because they have been put in the middle of it. They've been caught in the middle of what should be a real no-brainer decision, like you say, which is our baby needs medical help. Let's make that happen.
And this thing about follow the money. It's like, well, hang on. The money that's done to put, okay, if I needed brain surgery, am I going to go to the place with the most expensive equipment and the highest qualified doctors that's had the most money spent to get that qualification and training? Or am I going to go to fucking Liz Gunn and go, believe the people, the people know? You know what? And I'm pointing at myself, this people are idiots sometimes. I don't know more than doctors on medical situations. Doesn't mean they're always right, but it's like the place to do is to follow them. Like I had glandular fever when I was at university. The doctor got that wrong for 2 months and then they got it right. So we followed it through and we got to it in the outcome. But I didn't start by going, oh, they've got it wrong straight away. They've got it wrong. It's like, this is the system we've got. And most of the time they're spot on. And sometimes they need some time to get there. And very occasionally they're wrong. But what's happened now in society is they start with they're wrong. They've kind of flipped it. Maybe they'd say very occasionally they're right. I'd love to see what these people do if they have lung cancer, where they go, oh, chemo, no, radiation, no, that's following the money. That's what, it's just, it's such horseshit. And people like Liz Gunn and people like Counterspin Media, look, even if they're genuine, I'll be really gracious and say, even if they're genuine in their beliefs, they are the reason that so many people are ill-informed, and they actually should be held culpable on some level for these parents not getting the care they need for their child. It's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah. No, I agree. And, it's kind of ironic you use the example of brain surgery for people who, in some ways could really use it.
That's why I love having comedians on. All right. Hey, Jeremy, it's been so nice talking to you again, man. We haven't seen you around for a wee while, and it's
Really nice to be back. Yeah, I did actually go away. I escaped the country for the first time in a little while, so it's nice to be back.
I saw that. Where did you get off to? Did you go back to Canada?
I was in Canada for a month. Yeah, for all of October. Yeah.
Very cool. And how was it? Did you go to any ice hockey games?
I did. I went to see the Canucks lose yet again.
That's no good.
It was great fun.
All right. Hey, listen, thanks for joining us tonight. Remember, we have our Patreon up and running. If you're interested, if you like what we do and you'd like to be involved, patreon.com/Big Hearing News. We introduced our Fuck You Elon level the other day, $8. And if you join up for $8 a month, we will give you not just one blue tick, although he stopped doing that. We'll give you a surround, with 2 blue ticks in it. So that was twice as good as Elon if you want to join us. But if you enjoy what we do and you want to be a part of the team, remember, Christmas party happening for the Big Hearing News crew probably in the second weekend of December. If you are a patron, then you can come to the Christmas party, certainly virtually, not in person because it'll be at someone's house with a barbecue. But we'll do our monthly meeting actually at the Christmas party, and whoever's there will be able to interact with you guys and catch it up. But yeah, in general, if you like what we do and you want to support us, patreon.com/Big Hearing News. How is it being back, Jeremy? Have you enjoyed the night?
Yeah, lovely to be back. Nice to be back and chatting. So I'll see you again hopefully quite soon.
All right, team. You're a lovely bunch of people. I appreciate it. I'm sorry I didn't quite get to as many chats as I should have. It's going bananas in there. And, obviously, if Chewy was here, he'd be doing the chats better than I am. But yeah, I'm not as smart as Chewy. That's what it comes down to. But we'll see you tomorrow night from 10 p.m. for another edition of Big Hearing News. Stay safe. And until next time, all my friends, hooroo, have a good one. Catch you tomorrow. Bye-bye.